Hello children. Today we are going to take up a very important poem from your textbook Flamingo, an elementary school classroom in a slum by Stephen Spender. Before we start reading the poem, I want you to think about a few things. Have you ever visited a school in the slums or maybe in a rural area? Think about it. Was there anything that struck you? Was there any difference in the kind of infrastructure, the facilities that you enjoy in your school? Did it give you an opportunity to thank God for the good things that you have been blessed with? Or did it force you to think about the social injustice and inequalities that exist in our system? Well, let us know about the poet. Born in London, Spender attended Oxford University and fought in the Spanish Civil War. His early poetry was often inspired by social protest. In an elementary school classroom in a slum, he has concentrated on themes of social injustice and class inequalities. So, what is the central idea of the poem? The idea is that it deals with social injustice and class inequalities, and it attacks on the capitalistic economies in which the rich are becoming richer and the poor are devoid of any opportunity. Stephen Spender says nothing will change for the poor and the underprivileged till they are provided equality of education with opportunities. So the words that have been highlighted are the key phrases that give you the message of the poem. Please remember that. Some of the poetic devices that have been used by Spender in this poem are alliteration. When you repeat the same stressed consonant sound, example far, far from. So far, far is an example of repetition, but far, far from is an example of alliteration. Metaphor, when a word or phrase is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable. An indirect comparison in simple terms. Example from the poem is rat's eyes. Simile involves the comparison of one thing with another thing of a different kind using words like as and like, used to make a description more emphatic or vivid. We often say as beautiful as a rose, isn't it? So example from the poem is like rootless weeds. Transferred epithet is another kind of poetic device in which a modifier, usually an adjective, qualifies a noun other than the person or thing it is actually describing. From the poem, we use the phrase father's gnarl disease to understand transferred epithet because the word bone should have ideally been there with gnarled bones, but the meaning of the word bones has been transferred to disease, and that's why it's the most appropriate example for transferred epithet. Symbolism is the practice or art of using an object or a word to represent an abstract idea. And you would have come across the word symbolically it means. So many times you'll find in poems there is a literal meaning and there is a symbolic meaning. Example from the text is tall girls weighed down head. So let's quickly skim through the poem. Far, far from gusty waves, these children's faces, like rootless weeds, the hair torn round their pallor. The tall girl with her weighed down head, the paper-seeming boy with rat's eyes, the stunted, unlucky heir of twisted bones, reciting a father's gnarled disease, his lesson from his desk. At back of the dim class, one unnoted, sweet and young, his eyes live in a dream of squirrel's game in tree room other than this. On sour cream walls, donations, Shakespeare's head, cloudless at dawn, civilized dome riding old cities, belled, flowery, tireless valley. Open-handed map awarding the world its world, and yet for these children, these windows, not this map their world, where all their futures painted with a fog. A narrow street sealed in with a lead sky, far, far from rivers, capes and stars of words. Surely Shakespeare is wicked, the map a bad example, with ships and sun and love tempting them to steal, for lives that slyly turn in their cramped holes. From fog to endless night on their slag heap, these children wear skins peeped through by bones and spectacles of steel with mended glass, like bottle bits on stones. All of their time and space are foggy slums, so blot their maps with slums as big as dome. Unless governor, inspector, visitor, this map becomes their window, and these windows that shut upon their lives like catacombs break open till they break the town and show the children to green fields and make their world run azure on gold sands and let their tongues run naked into books the white and green leaves open. History theirs whose language is the sun. So it's a poem which is written in 4 stanzas, and most of it you will find has a very pessimistic tone, barring the last stanza, which has an optimistic note. And more importantly, if you see, the poem has the tone of very dark, depressing colors in the first 3 stanzas, but the last stanza showcases bright colors. There is a difference. We will understand that a little later. Let us take up line by line explanation of the poem. So the first 2 lines, the poet uses repetition of the word far to emphasize how far these children are from anything that is beautiful and nice, essentially highlighting the dim, dreary classroom where they are sitting. Coming to gusty waves, waves gives us an example of imagery because it paints the picture of something that is brimming with life. And here we have these children whose faces depict that their life is devoid of any enthusiasm. So essentially, far, far from gusty waves, these children's faces shows that these children's faces are bereft of any zeal for life. Also, it highlights the dim and dreary classroom setting. The next line, like rootless wheat, is an example of simile, where the poet is trying to literally paint the picture of these students by telling us that they have disheveled, dirty, weed-like hair, which is all scattered around their pale faces. But symbolically, he is trying to tell us that these children are like weeds. And what are weeds? Weeds are unwanted. Yes? So these children have been compared to something that is unwanted in society without a standing, without a support. That's why rootless. Okay? So that's the symbolic meaning. After giving us a general description of the classroom and the students, the poet talks about some specific students. So the first example is that of a tall girl who is emotionally and physically exhausted, as if drained of all life and enthusiasm. So when he says the tall girl with her weighed down head, he literally means that there is a girl sitting with a stoop, but symbolically he is trying to tell us that this girl is low on self-esteem, self-confidence, and that's why she's sitting like that, because she's burdened with responsibilities. The next example is of a paper-seeming boy with rat's eyes. These are 2 phrases which are most appropriate as examples of metaphors. So here he's trying to talk about the malnourished boy with the paper-seeming boy, the boy who's as thin as paper, and he has that rat-like eyes. Why rat-like? Because of the hungry, scavenger-like look in his eyes. The third example is an example of a boy who has inherited the disease of crooked bones from his father. His genetic disorder forces him to sit in one corner and learn his lesson. So father's gnarl disease is an example of transferred epithet. And why I say that it is transferred epithet? Because gnarled is the modifier which is telling us about bones actually. And the meaning of bones has been transferred to the noun disease. That's why it's an example of transferred epithet. So the last example is of a boy who's sweet and young, and therefore he's different from the other 3. There is one major difference, and that is that he has a dream in his eyes and he wants to be free like a squirrel. Does it remind you of any other chapter? Yes, I'm talking about Sahib and Mukesh in the Lost Spring. Remember, Sahib is no longer his own master. Mukesh insists on being his own master. So this child is like Mukesh because he dares to dream. He wants to enjoy and play freely like the squirrel in the garden outside, but he cannot as he must sit in the unexciting classroom. Poet has metaphorically created the image of a free world where the boy wants to live a liberated life like that of a squirrel. The next stanza talks about sour cream walls. So this is quite, sour cream itself brings a very bad taste to mouth, doesn't it? Here, sour cream, the metaphor has been used to describe the pale colored, unkempt walls. So, maybe once upon a time they might have been whitewashed, but for many years they have not been kept properly, and that's why the whole thing creates a very gloomy atmosphere. And the biggest irony is what adorns the walls of of the classroom. So the walls are unkempt, but on the walls you have beautiful paintings. Paintings of Shakespeare, of bright skies, of lovely buildings, of the most beautiful valley in the world, and the world map. So the pictures that have no meaning for these children have been used to decorate these walls. Open-handed map is the map of the world that is drawn and reshaped by the whims and fancies of the rich and the powerful who have access to education and better facilities unlike these children. So open-handed, why? Because the boundaries are not fixed. They change according to the likes and dislikes of the leaders of the world. And yet for these children, these windows not this map their world. So this is very important. It is these windows which give them the realistic view of the slums, not this map. Because this map is going to unnecessarily raise their expectations. And that's why over here, their map and world is not the world of slum children. The map on the walls is not the world of these people. Their world is the world of rotten slums, where there is no hope, because it says where all their futures painted with a fog. What is fog? Fog, that is something where everything is unclear. It's not certain, and that's why Spender uses metaphors such as their futures painted with a fog and lead sky to give us a glimpse of his pessimistic outlook. A narrow street sealed in with a lead sky, I would like to explain this with the famous line that we often use, every cloud has a silver linings. That is what we often say. But imagine, for these children, their situation is such that they are trapped in a narrow street. At the end of it also, there is no hope. It is sealed in with a lead sky. Lead is something that is impenetrable, children. So lead sky is also an example of metaphor. Far, far from rivers, capes and stars of words is an example of repetition and alliteration used to stress how the world of these children is devoid of beauty, knowledge and prosperity. Surely, Shakespeare is wicked, the map a bad example. Now, this line is very important because these are things that are exposing the children to the unrealistic world, and it is only tempting them to a life of crime. That is why it is pointless to put the picture of Shakespeare and the world map in the classroom, as these things are not relatable. They only tempt them to use unfair means, because Shakespeare creates a world of love and beautiful countries, beautiful shores. And what is that doing? It is only pushing them towards a life of unfair means. For lives that slyly turn in their cramped holes shows the state of their homes. They live in places where they are cramped together. From Fog to Endless Nights depicts the present situation of the children, which is without joy or hope, compared to fog and their bleak future is compared to an endless night suggesting death. This is also an example of metaphor. On their slag heap. Now, these lines clearly showcase the pathetic living conditions and their state of abject poverty. Even the line when we were talking about their cramped holes, what is that? It only shows their pathetic living condition. Slag heap is a reference to the filth and junk of the slum, which is their world, making their lives pathetic, full of misery and poverty. Like bottle bits on stones, their dreams are shattered as the glass bottles which are smashed on stones. It's an example of simile. There's another simile in this stanza. So blot their maps with slums as big as doom. Spender shows his anger through this pessimistic simile. Now many of you might, come up and say that why? Why can't we give them a dream? Why is he being so pessimistic that just because they cannot be a part of the beautiful world, don't showcase that world to them? Why can't we tell them that, look, this is the kind of world that you can be a part of and strive and become a part of that? Rather, Spender is saying that just show them the map of slums and not the world map. Let's see what he is trying to tell us in the last stanza. And as mentioned earlier, now see the contrast. In the first three stanzas, he has only used words like grey. He's used words like lead, fog, endless night. Everything is very dark. But now let's look at the last stanza where he's talking about beautiful green fields. He's talking about blue skies. He's talking about golden sand. So you see the contrast. From pessimism, he is moving towards optimism. So now he says there is hope and all is not lost. If only the powerful and rich people consider it to be their responsibility to provide education with opportunity to these slum children. Now this line is very important. This map becomes their window. Now this map becomes their window. He's talking about that with the right opportunities, the world map which is there on the walls of the classroom can open up new avenues and become the window to the world beyond the slums. So it will open up their horizon and it will showcase the beautiful world which is beyond the slums. And understand, these windows that shut upon their lives like catacombs is another important line. He is now talking about the windows of the slum school. So far the windows of the slums have been shutting out all opportunities for these children and confining them to their melancholic world as if they are sealed in underground cemeteries. So catacombs are underground graves. So he is comparing the slums to graves. And slums have been doing that kind of a thing. They have been shutting out all the good things, all the opportunities for these children. So poet uses a simile to compare their death-like existence in the slums to being pushed in catacombs. I hope you've understood the difference between their window and these windows. So their window is essentially, he's talking about opening up new opportunities, and these windows are the windows of the slums that have been confining them to a death-like existence. Break or break open. Now the last few lines actually is written like an appeal to all influential people to remove all hurdles. Break or break open is to remove all hurdles, all obstacles from the path of these children and help them to break through the obstacles to enable them to breathe in the fresh, beautiful and healthy environment. The poet ends on a positive note and wants opportunities to be available for these children, as those who strive for knowledge are the ones who create history. The last line is very important, is an example of metaphor. History is theirs whose language is the sun. This world is not ruled by the dumb and driven people. Only those who speak with confidence, power, and authority are heard and obeyed. Their language must have the warmth and power of the sun. So he says, provide them education with opportunities, and even these slum children will be able to create history. They will become as important as the sun. They will speak the language of the sun. And that's what he says and ends on a very optimistic note. I hope you have your textbook with you. Quickly underline and highlight the poetic devices. I've already explained the poetic devices. Now it is for you to underline in your textbook which ones are simile, are example of simile, and which ones are an example of metaphor. So this is just a quick recap of all the poetic devices. Transferred epithet, we've already done gnarl disease. Symbolism, there are also examples of alliteration. So quickly you can highlight it in your textbook. Let's move on to some of the MCQs. These are the kind of questions that you will get in your papers now with the changed format. One of the following phrases implies unhealthy children. Quickly, yes, you can write the answer yourself. Paper seeming boy. Yes, the metaphor that has been used, as thin as paper. The classroom walls have A. Pictures of Shakespeare, buildings with domes, world maps, and beautiful valleys. The last stanza is unlike the rest of the poem. Why? Yes, because of the optimistic note. Through the description of the slum children, the poet wants to express the social injustice and class inequalities prevailing in society. So this is the theme or the message of the poem. And yet for these children, these windows, not this map, their world, where all their futures painted with a fog. Which map is the poet talking about in the above lines? Yes, the map which is there on the walls. Yes, this world map. We look at the answers. Just try and recap. To what do the words, these windows, their world refer? These windows, the windows of the slums? Yes, their world is, yes, the world of rotten streets. What sort of future do the slum children have? Very bleak. Why is all their future painted with a fog? Yes, because it's not clear. They are not well educated. Let's quickly skim through the answers. The map which shows only the world of the rich and the powerful, the world that comprises of civilized domes, bells, scenic beauty of the tireless valley. These windows refers to the windows of the school classroom, which is their reality. Their world refers to the world of narrow lanes, small congested houses, foggy skies, and dim classrooms. The future of the slum children is bleak and uncertain. They have no hopes for their future. And their future is painted with a fog because they are not well educated and there is no one to guide them. What does the poet want for the children of the slums? 2 points. This is a 2 marker. Remember to give 2 points. I've been telling you in every presentation. Lives of slum children can be improved if inspector, visitor and governor take more interest in their lives and they take them out of their classrooms, show them the world, provide opportunities and resources available to privileged children. Why does poet call the map a bad example? The map represents the beautiful and wonderful world outside. However, this world is beyond the reach of the slum children. Their hopes and aspirations are confined to their world of despair and death. So that is why the map is a bad example. Yeah? So good luck. I hope I have been able to clarify all doubts. Thank you.